Greetings, folks. Welcome to a very special live launch event. Tonight, we are celebrating the launch of a project which is very near and dear to my heart. Two subjects that I could literally bore at an Olympic level on, and that is Jack the Ripper and H.P. Lovecraft. Now, tonight, I'm going to be joined by hopefully five of my team. I've got four of them around at the minute. Hopefully, the other one will join us. If not, it'll be fine. Right, I've just had a little bit of a technical difficulty. It's done this to me before. It just randomly said the event's been deleted on Facebook. Well, I didn't delete it, so what are you talking about? Anyway, cracking on. We will be doing a Q&A at the end. So get your questions in nice and early. There will be a chance to win a book later. Right, so yeah. My first guest this evening probably needs no introduction. We have been called the Beavis and Butthead of indie writing, all the way from Galloway. It is a familiar face, a bearded familiar face, Mr. David Green. Hello.
Hello there. How's it going?
Yeah, he did it. How are you doing, mate? You're right.
Yeah, good. I can't not do it because you told me that you would cry if I didn't do it.
Yeah, I probably would. I would be distraught.
I don't want to make you cry again. I've made you cry many times.
Yeah. But they don't even know about that.
They don't know about it. Never make you cry live.
That's it. That's the only rule.
That is
what happens behind closed doors stays behind closed doors.
Yeah. That is what you whispered into my ear that time.
Along with avocado.
I do like avocado.
This here anthology. It's another one of those projects where I don't know what to call it because it's kind of an anthology, but it's a shared word novel.
Yeah, like a shared world. Not a shared world anthology might be.
Yeah, that's probably it. But I think more so than 0 Hour, this is more linear because by the very nature of it.
Yeah, because like it's based on history, really.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's based on real events, so like it has to have, it has to make sense, and it has to, and you know from ripperologists and that kind of world, they don't really like inaccuracies.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I am a ripperologist, and you know my thoughts on certain things.
Yeah. But no, it was great fun. It's a perfect marriage of subject matters for you.
Yeah. Well, it was you that gave me the idea in the first place. Like, why don't you do this? It was like, oh, and I basically got all excited and disappeared. And I did the brief and everything in about an hour or something. I was like,
yeah. I didn't think you were going to mention that, I had like an inkling of an idea for it. It was like, this would be perfect for you. Why don't you do it? And then literally an hour later, you had like this 50-page document that was like, okay, I've been waiting on my life to do this. I just feel, it was good. It was good fun, and I was glad to be a part of it, to be asked to be a part of it as well, because it was, I do love the mythos of Lovecraft.
Indeed, you do.
And I do love Jack the Ripper. I love unsolved crimes in general.
I do. I mean, I'm not just a ripperologist. I'm a massive true crime buff. I've got hundreds of books on it, and but there's the unsolved ones. It's like obviously Jack the Ripper, and then you got the Zodiac in America, and all this.
Like DB Cooper, DB Cooper and all that kind of stuff. Just inexplicable things. Like, so I'm not really kind of into like the more modern ones, because I think more modern ones you're gonna kind of figure out at some point, because there's so much surveillance and all that. But like kind of ones like the Ripper and even the Zodiac, you know, it's in that kind of, even the Zodiac in the 70s, it's in that era where you could, you know, people could just disappear.
Yeah.
And no,
Yeah.
You know, they could do all these kind of things. And that's the great thing about the Ripper is like it kind of birthed the 20th century in terms of paparazzi and news and tabloid news.
Definitely.
It's a great thing to kind of explore, because like, you know, even now, like you get some people that were like, we've done all these tests, it's definitely this person, and it's like, well, people, no, it's definitely not this person, and it's one of these things that no one's ever going to know for certain, for 100%.
Oh, it's like I've been around, like I've been doing it. I've been like an amateur ripperologist for a long time, and I remember when the diary turned up, and everyone was like, "Oh, this is it. We know." Yeah. He's bollocks.
The thing is, though, I think as well, they could get like 99% definitive proof, and people would still not accept it because it doesn't fit with their head. But
yeah, of course.
You know,
we'll probably discuss some of the theories and things later, because there's some that are just so outlandish. Which really sort of really ties in with the Lovecraft thing, because it's like this bonkers stuff. Yeah.
Well, I think that we have written the definitive version of events. Like, I think this is completely true. There's no two ways about it. This is what happened, I think. Find out. Read on and find out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That isn't a spoiler, by the way. Or maybe it is. Maybe it's a red herring. Yeah. Right, mate. So, if you want to tell us a little bit about where you were coming from on your chapter and give us a bit of a read, as always, do just sort of invoke me and I'll reappear. All right, mate?
Okay. So I got asked to write the 12th chapter, which is the penultimate one. Tim himself did the last chapter. So he asked me if I would kind of set up the last chapter, basically. So I decided to write about Detective Abilene, who was obviously very famous and involved in the Ripper case. So mine is kind of set about a year after the last canonical murder of the Ripper, and Abilene is kind of like, I try to bring in some kind of Lovecraft feel to it as well, whereas in a kind of descent into paranoia and madness, because he's still obsessed about this case. Because obviously at the same time there's the Thames torso murders, and there was a lot of confusion as to which ones were Ripper ones, which ones were this and what have you. So he's still convinced that there's something going on in London. So he's going a bit crazy. So I'm going to read a little excerpt from when he goes to see someone who was a suspect of being Jack the Ripper, a guy called Robert Donston Stevenson. So it's about midway through my chapter, and Abilene goes to talk to him. I hammer on Stevenson's door, not giving a damn to the hour of day. To my surprise, he answers with haste. Dressed already, the man appears wide awake, as if he's been out of bed for several hours. Abilene, he says with a nod. You're looking a little fishy about the girls. Didn't take you for a drinker. Well, I wondered when you would darken my door. Come in. I follow without a word. His home is dark, and the shelves that line the corridors he leads me through hold many curious knickknacks. Overlarge unlit candles, fleshy books, skulls and balls made from glass. All a pretense. Stevenson is a great self-promoter, and seeks to portray the image of a man wise in the ways of the occult and matters other. When dealing with the man regarding the case of the London murders, there are two things to consider. First, his wife disappeared without trace a year before the first killing. Second, he checked himself into the London hospital during the duration of those killings attributed to the Ripper. Thus, he himself cannot be the man who slaughtered poor Nichols, Chapman, Stride, Eddowes and Kelly. However, the other murders? I won't put my coin on it, but I believe he's linked to it all. His stay in the London hospital during those dates seems too much of a coincidence to me. There's a cover-up. I feel it. Sir Warren's actions over the last year speak to it. and his mention of Stevenson confirms it for me. Why should this huckster get informed of a single matter from the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police? In the corner of my eye, I see a small, dishevelled, barefooted girl lurking in the shadows of a stairwell. I didn't know you had a daughter, I ask. I don't, Stevenson replies without looking at me. But, I begin, glancing over my shoulder. There's no sign of the girl. Jumping at shadows, Inspector, he asks, pushing through the heavy, ornate door. You've risen at an early hour, Stevenson, I say, as we enter his study, ignoring his barb. A fire's embers smoulder, and he sits in an armchair before it. A lit cigar is in an ashtray, besides a glass of what I guess is brandy, and a small bottle of what I judge as laudanum. I've yet to retire for the night, Abilene, he answers, stuffing the cigar in his mouth and taking the decanter. Can I tempt you? No, I reply, fighting the sneer that wants to form on my face. I sit and stare at the man. You're correct, I'm not much of a drinker. Cigar? I produce my pipe from my pocket with a supply of tobacco I keep with me. I brought my own. Do you mind? Make yourself at home, Abilene. I gaze around the study. Relics from the countries Stevenson has travelled to surround the room. As I light my pipe, a hand-drawn map above the fireplace draws my eyes. The words Dunwich stand out beneath the sketch of a small seaside town and its surrounding areas. I turn to see Stevenson smiling at me. It's like he sees through me. I've not heard of that place, I say, nodding towards the map. You will before long, I expect, he replies. His grin looks like a leer and holds a mixture of malice and madness. It's on the east coast of America, a most unsettling place, makes Whitechapel seem wholesome. He falls silent and continues to watch me with that half smile. The cigar burns between his fingers, the glass of brandy untouched in his other hand. You had a messenger from Sir Warren before I arrive, I understand. I received many visitors. My expertise sees to that. I snarl before I'm able to stop myself. Don't play games with me, Stevenson. I know he sent word. Or what? He laughs. The sound twists my insides. I believe this man mad beyond reason, his image a thin projection of sanity. You'll have me arrested. With the friends I have, I'd pay to see you attempt it. Yes, I grate. Visions of my beating him across the head with my cane swim in my mind. I reject them. Test me, Stevenson. On what charges, he answers, blowing smoke from his wet lips. Not disclosing who visits me. I point at him with my pipe. On the disappearance of Anne Dreary, your wife, the one, rumour says, you've boasted of killing. Of other rumours concerning the materials you create your occult candles and books with. Of your dalliances with prostitutes and their statements of your needs and acts. Not to forget the tips I have from people swearing at you, sir, and Jack the Ripper himself. I may make none of these charges stick, but Christ above, I swear to make your life uncomfortable unless you answer my damned questions. Stevenson reacts in a way I didn't expect. The man laughs. A full, hearty laugh. He places the glass and cigar down as he claps his hands. It infuriates me. My fingers tighten on my cane. Bravo, Abilene, he wheezes and wipes his eyes. His mirth at my words has brought tears to them. Well played. Oh, I do enjoy you. I've always said we should bring you on side. You're a grand sport. Detective Inspector Abilene, you've got me cornered. I swear I'll provide my full cooperation. Bastard, I snarl. Stevenson bows his head as his eyes shine with a maniacal light. Yes, I received word. Another corpse, nasty business as it goes. I released a grip on my cane, though my hands tremble. I clasp them in my lap. Why come to you? Inspector, I've already told you, my expertise. Enough of the pretense, Stevenson. His face grows serious within a second, changing like an extinguished light. I'm not at liberty to say, ask your Sir Warren. I grind my teeth and change tact. Tell me about the Jews. His eyebrows raise, and that harlequin-like grin reappears. They're people from Israel, don't you know? Our Lord in heaven, Jesus, counts among their number. Stevenson, I snarl. His face switches again. It's as if I'm dealing with two separate people. His voice becomes flat and heavy. This is bigger than you can imagine, Abilene. vaster than you or I, or your precious Ripper. Can't you smell the shrimps? It smothers London. Take my advice, walk away. Retire to the countryside and enjoy it while you can. Leave the important things to those equipped for it. What are the Jews, damn you? Stevenson smiles, but he's still the serious version, the one that makes my insides itch and my blood feel dirty in my veins. The wheel continues to turn, Aveline. It's a cycle, and in my opinion, inevitable. We delay, delay. Minor games for insignificant peons struggling for or against a cause they don't have the capacity to understand. Instead, you blame and label. This person is the Ripper. This person is a killer. The other one in the shadows, a nightmare. Even you, the respected Detective Inspector Aveline, label your unwitting Kalowski as your suspect. Tags on the world to ease the burden on your fragile, childlike minds. How little you know. And I'll leave it there because I don't want to go on for too long and do any spoilers from that point onwards.
Nice. Yeah. Actually, interestingly enough, I actually have a reproduction of one of Abeline's reports there. So yeah, which is quite an amusing little thing. But yeah, this is one of my favourite Jack the Ripper investigations. This book, because it actually is the one that names Stevenson as Jack the Ripper, and he's one of the least plausible suspects.
Yeah.
But I found it's one of the most entertaining.
Yes,
it's definitely one of the more entertaining ones. And the interesting thing is just this pub here, the Cricketers, is just down the road from me in Brighton. And I've actually seen they've got the ledger with his signature in it. Now I've actually seen it. I've got my picture taken.
Right, cool. Well, he was a really bad bloke as well, though. So that's why that's why it was he's a very interesting kind of character, because
he was one of Crowley's mates, one of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Yeah.
So it was like when I was kind of doing this chapter, I was kind of like, well, I kind of have to include him because he was he's such a, like you say, he's a bad bloke, and he had, he boasted of murdering his wife and all this kind of stuff. But he had very powerful friends, obviously, and but he was. The weird thing about it is he literally, before the first murder, a few days before, he booked himself into the London hospital, which is like an asylum basically, and was there for the duration of it. And then,
well, interestingly, basically for the people at home, I'm sorry I didn't do a very great intro because I was flustered because of it breaking on me. But it's not just doesn't just take in the Jack the Ripper murders. It also takes in the Thames Torso murders, which happened at the same time. Now, the Rainham mystery, which is chapter 1, one of the a lot of people think that was Stevenson's wife. So it all ties in nicely. And he was one of the people I wanted to get into it. When I was fleshing it out. Yeah. Awesome. All right, then, matey. Yeah, I will bring you back in a bit, and we'll probably end up going completely off the rails as usual. Right. Yeah, my next guest has been on one of these kind of things before. Originally from the south of the US, now living up the north. So it must be one hell of a problem with the cold. Is Holley Cornetto. Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah. I'm glad you're feeling better because you've just getting over a bout of COVID, aren't you?
Yes. As we were talking about before, I had contracted it, and for me it was mild, thankfully, because I was terrified when I got the diagnosis. I thought, oh my God, it's going to be horrible. But it turned out to be kind of like a mild flu. It was unpleasant, don't get me wrong. I don't recommend it. But fear and expectation and reality. But yeah, I'm glad I was up for this because I was excited. I appreciate you inviting me to be a part of 13 Victims. I was excited from the get-go. I was a little terrified, but also very excited.
A little bit of fear is a good thing, isn't it?
Well, it was one of the first collaborative efforts like this I'd worked on. So it was one of, I since have worked on a couple, so I've gotten more the hang of it. But when I got your invitation, I do love the Lovecraft mythos. I love Ripper. So I was like, okay, maybe I can do this. But it was harder in reality to kind of mesh those things, because you want to be true to Lovecraft. You want to kind of, do his work justice, but you also want to be factually as accurate as possible with the Ripper stuff. So it was a neat balance, and I actually did a lot of research for my chapter. So it was a lot of fun, but it was also very nerve-wracking.
Yeah, well, I found that once I got past the initial excitement of doing it, I was kind of like, oh crap, because obviously it's my project, so I'm gonna have to make sure that like everything's kind of factual.
Right.
Yeah, so a lot of my time was spent going through everybody's chapters, like with my Jack the Ripper stuff, just going, yeah, that date's right, like that date's right.
Right. There was a little bit of difficulty with mine too, because as I'll mention, my victim, Rose, was not necessarily considered a Ripper victim at the time, and still isn't. Like, some people argue that she was not, because of the strange circumstances in which she was found, which I'll get into when I talk about my chapter a little. But so it was hard, because in some of the books on Jack the Ripper, there was very little, if any, information about her included.
Yeah.
So very early on, I remember reaching out to you, and I was like, help. Help.
Yeah, didn't I end up, was it you I ended up scanning like loads of?
Yes, you scanned a chapter. I think the book was like The Forgotten Victims or The Lost or something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah, it was one of the ones I've got.
Yeah, and you'd scanned like a whole chapter and sent it to me so that I could read. But it actually ended up being very helpful, because because I was trying to get my time frame right, because I was trying, as you said, to be as accurate as I possibly could. Yeah. So it was nice to see that, and to be able to see, like, the report that they made, talking about whether or not, she was murdered, and if so, what had happened, because those documents were actually, included, or at least notes from them. So it was actually really cool to see the history there. Yeah.
Excellent. Right. So, if you want to tell everyone a little bit about it, and then give us a little bit of a read, and again, just sort of, just give me a wave and say, or you come back or whatever when you've finished.
Okay.
Take it away.
All right. Well, I was lucky because my copy actually arrived today. So it's a beautiful, beautiful book, beautiful paperback. Before I start, I wanted to show you some of the work that went in by Tim. At the beginning of every chapter, there's these beautiful, beautiful pictures here. So, I mean, it's just, I opened it and I was in love. I thought it was wonderful. So I think it adds something. So thank you, Tim, for that. When getting into my chapter, as I mentioned before, my chapter is on Rose Millet, or Millet. I'm not exactly 100% sure how to pronounce it. But she was an unusual victim because some people say that she may have not been a Ripper victim at all. She was found in an alley or a yard, and there were no marks on her body. They did not know how she had died at first, and there was some speculation about whether she had just like gotten drunk, because her nickname was Drunken Lizzie. So there was some speculation that perhaps she'd gotten drunk and fallen over and choked on her own collar. And then there was speculation that she might have been a Ripper victim, and that perhaps Jack the Ripper had been interrupted after he had strangled her before he had gotten to the mutilation, which we all know he's very famous for. So there was never anything really conclusive, about her case specifically. There was argument about whether they should count it as a murder or an accident. So for me, picking her, I thought she was an intriguing victim. I thought it would be interesting to write about not necessarily her death or how she died, but the aftermath of that. So that's kind of what my chapter does. I start with a very short excerpt of when she's alive, like the final moments of her life, which have been documented by witnesses. And then after that, I follow the police sergeant, Robert Golding, who was the sergeant who found her body. In order to try and kind of keep myself true to Lovecraft, I wanted to do a descent into madness. So he starts to go a little crazy from the things that he's seen, both in the past in earlier chapters, and now that he's at this place. So for my excerpt, I'm going to read also apart from about the middle of my chapter, where things start getting a little spooky. Golding heard the figure tailing him from the shadows long before he glimpsed it. The shambling, squelching tread had been with him since he'd started home from High Street. He wandered past rag shops and shoe shines, walking slowly as if he had not a care in the world, listening keenly for the suction cup sound of his pursuit. By the time he arrived at his building, a cold sweat trickled down his neck, soaking his collar. The sound had gotten closer, the pursuit faster, and though he looked over his shoulder and into the alleys behind him, he saw no sign of anyone or anything. Panic overtook him, and he sprinted down the hallway, fumbling his key into the lock. He pushed the door open and stumbled over the entry. The door slammed shut behind him, and he clicked the lock back into place. Only when his back was against the door did he finally exhale a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He only had a moment before he heard it again. That sound. The sound of someone walking in wet shoes. The slick, wet steps made their way down the corridor and stopped at his door. He held his breath. Maybe if he was quiet, they would leave. The doorknob rattled. He bit his lip to stop himself from crying out. He turned slowly and put an eye to the peephole. The distorted view revealed watery, unwinking eyes and a greenish-gray skin with webbed hands groping at the door. Golding screamed. The rattling intensified, followed by a rhythmic pounding like the crash of waves in a storm as the thing outside threw all the force of its body against his door. Golding wondered for a frantic moment if the heavy oak would hold. His heart thudded out an SOS against his ribs, and he hugged the mud-caked parcel against his chest. He knew this was what the man-shaped thing outside his door wanted, the blade. He tugged the cloth from around it, revealing an intricate carving shaped like frog-fish things he couldn't describe, things that shouldn't exist. He took the dagger in his hand, and a jolt like an electric current shot through his body. For a moment, he thought he'd been stunned or struck by lightning. Time froze, and he felt as if he were levitating. The pounding and rattling stopped. All was silence. Then, that voice again. The ageless, sexless voice from everywhere and nowhere filled his mind. Though he did not know the gibberish language, impressions streamed through his head, and he understood. The waves shall rise, and mankind will drown and float in the darkest depths of the sea. The old ones shall return, even as the cries of man gurgle in their throats and choke on seaweed and sand. Suffering is their offering. Death is their sacrifice. The fall of man and man's gods shall usher in a new era of history, where gods once dead and dreaming awaken and arise to reclaim that which has always belonged to them, to remind mankind that he is an insignificant stain upon the annals of history. Golding woke sometime later to find himself laying in a puddle of murky water that had pooled on his rug. With the water came the briny, fishy smell of the Thames. He checked his watch. He'd lost almost a whole day. Damp and shivering, he jumped up in disgust and stripped off his clothes. A dark piss stain ran down the front of his pants. He glanced at the blade which rested beside him on the floor. He wrapped it carefully in his shirt and placed it on his bed. That thing that had followed him from High Street knew where he lived now, and he was certain it would be back. It wasn't safe here anymore. He'd go down to the station and he'd take the blade with him. He'd be safer there. He pulled on a pair of fresh trousers and a shirt, stopping for a moment to retrieve the bottle of laudanum from the cabinet. Just in case, he reassured himself as he tucked it into his coat. Okay, Tim, awesome. Come back.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I love that when you sent me that and I was reading that, because that's got that really like proper Lovecraft vibe to it, you know, which is what I was like. That's something I was so impressed by with you lot. Like I've said before, I couldn't have picked a better team because you got the feel of not just Whitechapel murders, but that Lovecraftian feel spot on.
Right.
And you know, yeah, they seem like perfect bedfellows, but they are quite different in a way. But I loved what you did there with his that descent into madness and that. Yeah, the fish frog things just makes my hair stand up on my arms. It's just like
it helped that I reread The Shadows over Innsmouth shortly before I started on the story, because that is my favorite Lovecraft story. Like, I know a lot of people like The Call of Cthulhu or The Mountains of Madness better, but for me, I like Shadows over Innsmouth the most. And I've probably read that story like four or five times, just, you know, because I love it so much. And so I was trying to capture that kind of dread and that creeping feeling of, at first, you know, something's not right, but then like shit hits the fan. So that's what I was going for. And at that point in my chapter, that's where, you know, things really hit the fan. And it's like, is he crazy? You know, is he hallucinating because he may or may not have a drug or drinking problem? He may or may not have seen things. He may or may not be, you know, suffering from exhaustion. So it's really like, you know, is he actually experiencing this, or is this, you know, the sum of a mental breakdown? So that I do enjoy that, and I've done a couple of stories with that kind of theme because I love it. I always love it, and it's because of Lovecraft, I think, because, you know, the way that he originated this whole kind of style, and so I tried very, very hard to keep true to that.
Yeah, no, I think you did an absolutely fantastic job. Yeah. But you mentioned right at the start about the illustrations.
Yes.
Now, as you can see behind me, I have a lot of actual reproductions of the newspapers from the time, and I found things on the internet like and wanted them included, basically like internet images. But because they were on the internet, there we go. Yeah.
I don't know. Sorry, my cameras. There we go.
Yeah, the women arm.
Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. It's but because they've been on the internet, they've been compressed, and they needed to be a certain resolution, or they just look crap. So I ended up spending like best part of like 7 or 8 hours. Yes. Well, there we go. Yeah, I've got reproductions of the letters here as well. There's the famous. There's the famous "Dear Boss" letter. It was not showing up very well, but yeah. So I ended up scanning them. Seriously, it took me like best part of like 7 hours. My entire day was spent with my printer scanning.
The book is so much better for it, though. When I opened it, like, that was a nice surprise. Like, I saw the one in the opening, and I thought, oh, that's nice, and it has like the map of in the very beginning.
Of the canonical 5, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I thought, oh, that's a really nice touch. But then as I flipped through and I saw there's one at the beginning of like every chapter, I was like, holy crap. Like, that for me was a big, big bonus. So thank you for that.
I wanted to, like, right from the beginning, I wanted to have that. I wanted every chapter to have like the illustrated police news picture of that headline of that murder. I wanted them all to do it. And some of them were very difficult to find, and some of them were impossible to find, but I think I found it like certain amount of stuff. And so yeah, that was something right from the beginning that I wanted in there.
It helps set the tone too. I feel like
I just think it's something a bit cool. Yeah.
Right. Like, it really does, because you see it and it kind of puts you in the mindset of that era, because, you know, these are, like you said, you know, actual things taken from newspapers and other accounts from that time period, and I think it puts you in that headspace.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Okay, Holly, I'm going to bob you off now, and I will get you back on in a bit. Okay, my next guest, again from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, another veteran of these things before. The first person who ever interviewed me. That's Trisha McKee. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very good. Very good. Thank you for coming on. Yeah.
Yes.
So I know. Yeah. So I've got to ask, like, like, because I obviously I know your work and things like that, and I knew that you were a fan of I knew you knew like about like serial killers and true crime and that sort of thing.
Yes.
Now, what I didn't realize,
Yes.
you would like to explain.
Well, I was always of the belief that you say, if you're asked to do something such as this, that's just such an amazing project, you say, yes, you can, and you figure it out later. Because while I know a lot of true crime, I'm passionate about it, love it, you know, read the books, see documentaries, Jack the Ripper was not one of them. Really had no.
Well, I just thought, oh, she's into true crime. She'll know what she knows.
But that is the one that I've missed. And I don't know a lot about Lovecraft either. I mean, it's always on my bucket list to, you know, I've read a few things, but nothing, you know. So this was quite an experience. I can say I'm hooked now, definitely.
Excellent.
But yes,
no, the one thing I will say is when I read your chapter, because you hadn't told me this at this point,
no.
and like, all the details were so accurate. I was like, yeah, I knew she knew it.
You know, when I'm involved in something, I do the research, I study it, I learn it. Because if I'm going to say yes to something, I give it my all. Absolutely. Yeah. And plus, it's such a fascinating subject. It's not like it was work.
No, yeah, it's not like it's really work, is it?
No. So it was definitely challenging, but it was a fun it was just amazing. And to be with your work and everyone else who's contributed, what an honor, because this is such a great collection. I can't even imagine how it would come out any better than it has.
Yeah. No, I was like seriously impressed with like every chapter that came in. I was just like, yep, that's spot on.
Yes,
that's spot on. I mean, there was like from the project leader point of view, I had very little to do on the editing side. It was just a few things like, no, that you just change that bit, but like very, very little in terms of story wise or anything like that to make it all like coalesce. It just all worked, and it was just like, oh, this is great.
Yes.
Now I was like your chapter. I was so happy because you brought in one of my favorite Lovecraftian things, which is which I will let you explain if you want to let everybody know and give us a reading. I'll be back soon.
Thank you. So my chapter is on Catherine Eddowes. I kind of went into her life before the murder, before she was murdered. I went into her life. She had left her husband and her family. She was a big drinker. She was known around town for big fights with the man she was with. And it kind of played into seeing the shadows, and kind of losing her mind because she knows she's being followed by someone or something. So I'll read a little part of it now. John huffed and puffed, his glare pinning her, but Catherine was more concerned with the creatures getting closer. They were more than just shadows now, solid figures silhouetted against the moonlit night, slumping and as large as their own shadows, it seemed. I'll go, anywhere but with this one. Keep your distance, Catherine. Go find yourself another man to enjoy your company. He stormed off, and Catherine realized with a sinking feeling that it was too late to get a bed. She would have to hunker down somewhere relatively safe. She almost laughed at that. There was no safe place out in the streets. As she wandered through town, she knew she was being followed, and when she turned around one particularly dark corner into an even darker alley, she saw it, the creature, face to face. And even in her scariest nightmares, her most vivid imagination, she had not envisioned such even such terror-evoking images. The creature looked part human, part canine. It stood on 2 feet, but hunched forward so that its front paws almost touched the ground. It had a long snout, round eyes, and pointed ears, confirming all those other accounts. His skin was hairless, an odd tint of green visible in the limited light. Catherine was frozen to the spot, hearing rustling behind her, seeing the shadows out of the corner of her eye that told her more were surrounding them. She squeezed her eyes shut, sure this was the end, sure that they had stalked and followed for this very moment. The creature in front of her crouched down, watching her with the unsettling red eyes, drool falling from his fangs in thick strands. A stench reached her, and she turned her head, trying to escape the scent, a gag racking her body. The creature rose slowly, its body rocking side to side as it watched her, its thick gray lips widening to reveal more sharp yellow teeth. And Catherine was frozen to the spot, physically unable to move, to even breathe, as the creature seemed to take over her functions. And as it watched her, she was positive it could read her thoughts. Something told her that. Something invaded her mind to let her know this was more than the average scary creature. This was above and beyond the average nightmare. The creature's movements were jerky, almost staticky. It was hard to predict its next move, as it seemed to be of another world, moving in a way she had never seen. Then she heard whistling in the distance, footsteps approaching. The creature leaned toward her, its head rolling back and forth before it stepped back. It stepped away from her, and her breath released, her chest heaving, hungry for air. And then it was gone, the shadows of the others following. She did not even see their departure. One moment, the demon being was in front of her, moving in its sporadic motion, and then it was gone, leaving the metallic taste of fear in her mouth, her eyes dry and blurry, and her stomach muscles sore from the rigid posture. And I'll stop there.
Excellent. Yeah, now you see, one of my favorite Lovecraft stories is Pickman's Model. So, and we hadn't talked about this because I wanted to include the old ghoulies in mine. And we hadn't actually discussed this at the time. So when I read it, I was like, oh, excellent. Right, we can tie that all up.
Good fit, yes. Yeah. Well, it figured, reading on her history, it just seemed like something was driving her, away from her family. Something was haunting her. And I just thought that was the perfect thing to.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously, I don't want to go into details and give any spoilers, but if you know the story, if you know Pickman's Model and specifically the paintings of Pickman, then it'll all make I just really liked the way you wove that into it, and I really enjoyed that. Because like I say, I love Pickman's Model. It's one of his more understated pieces. It's never going to be one of the big ones, but I always love the feel of it. I don't know. There's just something about that story that's always sort of stuck in my head. Yeah, one of the quieter pieces. Yeah, no. So excellent. So thank you, Trisha. Yeah, I'll get you back on in a bit. Righto. My next guest, who just randomly decided to use one of my favorite things ever out of the Lovecraft pantheon, from Buffalo, New York, is Jonathan Inbody. How are you doing, sir? Hey, man. Yeah, very good. Very, very good. Yeah. So I've got to say, when you came to me and said, I'm thinking of doing this. Oh, yes.
Pretty much immediately, as soon as you invited me to be a part of this, I was like, I know exactly what I'm going to do, and I have to do it, which I won't say specifically, but if anyone is watching closely, say like right behind me, you might be able to see.
Oh, yeah.
So if anybody knows Lovecraft stuff, they might recognize the general shape of that.
Yeah.
My brother for
buzzing
Christmas,
wings. People might know what we're talking about.
Yeah, my brother for Christmas found a guy who does like Necronomicon pages. He does like pen and ink drawings and then chars the paper. It's really cool. If I had that guy's name on hand, I would say it right now, and I can't remember it. I feel terrible, but it's awesome.
You'll have to like take a picture of that or something.
I will.
Yeah, please do, because that brilliant. I'm just looking at it now with envy.
Yeah, right. But either way, it was so my general experience with this was you and I forget, it was because of your story Yellow Protocol right that we first talked?
Yeah, because you did an edit on it, didn't you?
I did, right. That's what it was.
You did a beta reading on it. Yeah.
Because I like at the beginning of the story, I was like, oh, cool, it's like a King in Yellow thing. And then I got to the end and I was like, oh, it is a King in Yellow. Like, this is perfect. Great. So it just worked out perfectly of like, oh, look, somebody who has the exact same frame of reference for this stuff as I do. Like, it really was a perfect fit. And when I got invited into this too, like, I'm not a huge true crime guy. I don't know. I have a huge grounding in weird fiction. Like I'm constantly like Lovecraft, William Hope Hodgson, Algernon Blackwood, like everybody.
Oh, the Willows, mate. The Willows is all I'm saying.
I can't even. Yeah, we can't get started on that. If
no, we'll be here all night.
That'll just be what we're doing. But but either way, so like I have much more of a grounding in that kind of stuff than I do in the Ripper or the true crime stuff. But coming into this, it was really nice to be able to have, like, you had a lot of resources for the Ripper killings. So I kind of just consumed all of that.
Yeah.
And I kind of landed on this idea of my chapter is towards the middle of the book, and it's kind of an outside. It's one of the killings that is not necessarily a canonical Ripper killing, and I decided that it would be a. I thought it would be interesting to do kind of an outside context, like a fully outsider character coming into this conflict that you establish over the course of the book. In a lot of weird fiction, you have like a very educated kind of a person. Like you have a certain type to the Lovecraft protagonist.
Yeah. They're all scholars and learned gentlemen of letters, aren't they? Yeah.
And I kind of decided it would be interesting to have like more of a layman, like actually weirdly, the point of reference character I used for my main character is Ned Land from 20,000 Leagues Beneath the Sea. He was just like a general sailor guy. Yeah.
I can see that. Yeah.
This guy's a little scummier than Ned Land. Ned Land was a little more traditional hero, but either way, I thought it would be interesting to see how a pretty normal workaday kind of guy would kind of interact with these two groups and kind of come into this conflict and try and make a buck from it. So hopefully it works. I don't know.
Right. Well, I'll leave you to it, mate. Just give me a shout when you're ready.
Will do. Okay, so like I said, I just kind of basically set it up. I'm just going to read just the briefest hint of the beginning of this, just so everybody kind of gets a vibe for the out of context this character is being kind of brought into all of this. It'll make a lot more sense when I start reading, so here goes. In the years since that wretched autumn, much has been made of things about which I know very little. All I know and all I care to know is my own part. I've been a whaler, a lighthouse keeper, a smuggler, and a thief. But while the Ripper reigned in London, I was a sailor without a ship, lounging about the city on what some might call an extended shore leave. I spent most of my days and many of my nights at the docks, scrounging up whatever dishonest work I could find. I didn't pay any special attention to those clammy-skinned Americans, the ones I later heard called Innsmouth folk. But I sure did take notice of their late-night comings and goings. As the weeks wore on, I saw more newcomers at the docks. They were well-to-do and finely dressed, but something in their manner suggested an air of tactical concern. The Innsmouth folk were careful to avoid them, and to clean up all traces of the small skiffs they snuck to and from the wharf, loaded up with strange, heavy boxes. I never thought much of it myself, assuming it to be a quiet conflict between a ring of smugglers and a group of plainclothes policemen, but I was never one to pass up a potential payday. And so, when I saw a dark ship coming into port one night, as I sat drinking some port of my own at the end of a half-rotted dock, I slid back into the shadows and watched closely. There were 3 men waiting for the ship, whose faces I had seen many times before over the previous weeks. There was the tall, bulging bald man with the clammy skin and the almost unblinking stare, who was, undoubtedly, as I'd come to understand later, from Innsmouth. Next to him, a short, thin man with a mustache puffed on a thin pipe, glancing back and forth every few seconds, as if on the edge of a nervous fit. Behind them, the third man was broad-shouldered and barrel-chested, standing with his back to the others and his arms folded, some kind of bodyguard. When the ship had docked, the short man with the mustache went aboard to speak with the captain, while his taller and fatter companions aided a few surly crewmen in unloading some cargo. The box was massive and looked heavy, and only once the clammy fat man got behind it to push did the group's efforts to move it seem to have any effect. As they moved it down the gangplank, I could hear some kind of animal hissing and growling from inside, slamming itself against the steel-reinforced walls of the crate in an impotent fury. The broad-shouldered bodyguard whistled, and a horse-drawn wagon emerged from around the corner of a nearby building, then stopped at the edge of the wharf. The group of crewmen strained to lift the gigantic crate, then carried it slowly over to the wagon and set it down in the back. The bodyguard shook the hand of the wagon's rider, almost certainly passing him money at the same time, then patted him on the back and stepped out of the street. The wagon's driver tipped his hat and snapped the reins, and the horses pulled the wagon down the street and off into the distant fog. The short man with the mustache returned to the other two, and the three spoke quietly amongst themselves as the crew returned to the dark ship to ready it for departure. This wasn't the first midnight liaison, nor the first mysterious crate of unknown cargo, but this was surely the most interesting. And I'd wager the finely dressed gentleman that seemed opposed to the smugglers would think so too. I watched for them at the docks the next few nights, and when none arrived, I sought them out, following a tall, gaunt, and gray-haired man that I knew was one of them, from his home to a pub that I was no stranger to. And that's the table setting for my little story.
Nice. Excellent. Again, you've got that. That's, I mean, the way that's narrated is so Lovecraft.
Yeah, I wanted to do that like purple prose, like overwritten but not too overwritten. Like
yeah. It's a fine line, isn't it? I mean, it's something I struggle with all the time. It's
bad weird fiction. Right, you can always tell.
Yeah, the right amount of purple.
Yes, right. I feel like every time every time I write a weird fiction story, I go back through and then go like, okay, I really got to cut a lot of this description. This might be too much now, you know?
Yeah, I'm the same, mate. I'm exactly the same. It's like, right, yeah, I could lose an entire page of flowery description there.
Cut out all the adjectives.
Yeah, oh God, yeah, there you go. Yeah. Nice one, man. Yeah, no, in fact, yeah, I like I say, you shot me in the heart with your choice of entity,
it is.
Let's say.
I think everybody who's a Lovecraft fan will enjoy it because they're that specific group of Lovecraft creatures is one of my favorites.
Yeah, definitely. And you're wearing the right colored robe as well, you know.
Yes, I've got my best Hastur yellow here.
yeah. Excellent, man. Excellent. Right, mate. I'll get you back in a bit. Right. Yes. So our final guest of the evening, he finally made it. I can see him cringing at the little. I can see you all, by the way. Yeah. So my final guest of the evening is Mr. Drew Starling. Hello, mate.
Hello, Brother Mendees. How are we doing over there?
How are you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm awesome.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this for 17 and a half minutes.
First off, congrats on your book that's coming out very shortly. Central.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, excellent.
You know, I've got a little bit of a problem here. You didn't tell me that the people reading before me were not going to have any foul language or nudity. And as you might remember from Andy Chapman's story, there's a lot of both of those things.
It's fine, mate. mate, the links, I'm always swearing. Don't worry about that. Oh, yeah, no. Well, this brings me to what I was going to say about yours. Because you came to me and you said, I was just thinking about this. And the fact that they're all like prostitutes and stuff. Can I go there? And I went, yes, please do. Because you need like that variety in there. And I thought you did it like spectacularly. It was just like seedy. It just oozes seediness, your chapter.
Well, you know, look,
Yeah.
I have you to thank for a lot of things in my life. One of them is I wrote my first sex scene for you. Okay. I wrote my first point of view from a horror scene from you. Okay. Third, as you also know, and I'll apologize to everybody up front, I didn't know shit about Lovecraft before this started. So you had to give me a crash course. Be like, yeah, no, but you have to inject these things. Okay. So we did that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you pushed me in a lot of ways here, Tim, and I'm glad we did it. This was a lot of fun to finish.
Yeah. No, I just thought, you know, because I like your style and I like what you do. So I just thought, oh, come on, man, if I could give him a bit of a prod.
There we go.
Right, mate. Yeah, so if you want to tell us a little bit about your chapter and then give us a little bit of a read, that'll be absolutely superb. And I'll be back in a bit.
Rad. Okay, thanks everybody. To all 2 of you who are still here. Let's see. So I wrote about Annie Chapman, and the reason I wanted to write about Annie Chapman was because, as Tim says, yes, I wanted to sort of get under the hood, no pun intended here, of a whore that was one of these victims. And there was also an interesting person, a mystery kind of person in the story of Annie Chapman called the Pensioner, who I think at one point was maybe rumored to be the Ripper, but it's proven sort of not to be. So I really wanted to get into the life and the setting of Annie Chapman here. So I will go ahead and, if you are sensitive to language, if you don't like Americans butchering British slang, and if you're under the age of 18, please close your ears or log off. Okay, here we go. The 6 o'clock hour was one of transition in the spatial fields. Bodies shuffled about the streets and alleys in darkness. Public house proprietors changed oil lamps, swept patios, and tossed out daytime drunkards in preparation for the nighttime rush. Hawkers and buskers and sellers of material wares shuttered their wagons and bodegas, lest the cloak of night expose them to street urchins that would pick them bare. Courtesans coagulated and adjusted each other and swapped stories from the night before, and their cackles caromed through the narrow byways and echoed through the theater, drenching the quarter in a distinct feeling of besiegement from a flock of invisible crows. The animalistic eyes of many such women fell on Annie Chapman, practically bounding through Dorset Street, arm in arm with the pensioner, brushing her body up against him every chance she got. Tonight, the tones of whores' voices flared in a defensive prominence. They clung closer together and moved in large groups, many of them terrified to travel even a handful of steps beyond the rookery of lodging houses where the lights stayed on all night. Some gazed at Annie in jealousy, others in pity for what they assumed would be the next victim of a plague of death that beset upon them. The pensioner held open the door to the Britannia pub, and Annie stepped inside. She sensed a sharp malaise amongst the scattered patrons of the bar. Many sat alone and with little left in their cups. Some had the eyes of other beings, or at least they looked that way, for they did not look upon her with delight or sexual inquiry as any sense of cordiality. "Sir, I do say," Annie turned around and the pensioner was gone. "You bitch!" A searing female voice bellowed from the bar. "Annie Chapman, you cunting bitch!" What felt like the force of a hammer hit Annie square in the jaw. She crashed to the floor, taking out 2 innocent bystanders in her wake. "You seething, cunting whore!" Another blow, this time a shot to her temple from the boot of her assailant that cracked her neck and sent her barreling into the wall. Annie scampered to her knees and shielded her head from the blows raining down on her. She managed a moment of clarity enough to face her assailant, and she drove the bottom of her own boot square into the crotch of the woman above her. The woman grunted and flew backwards. Annie rose, her heart pounding, her adrenaline coursing, her fists balled tightly in anger. "Eliza!" Annie shouted. "You spawn of a mongrel's cock! The feck ye come at me in a flying rage for? Feck ye goddamn soap! That's my bar of soap, Annie. And you ain't giving back in 3 days now. I can smell you from here, you cunting shite. You ain't even used it once to clean your fat reeking arse. Ya done sold it, Annie. I seen it hanging in Michael Swanson's storefront." Eliza sprang towards Annie with her right fist cocked, but as she lunged, her foot snagged the seat of the bar stool that sent her toppling early. A signet ring on Eliza's fist glinted in the low light of the bar as she flew forward, and she swung a desperate fist that slammed into the meat of the same breast Annie had borne to entice the pensioner into a second servicing. A sharp pain, not unlike a sharp pain, not like the pain from the impact of the punch, rocketed through her ribcage and jostled her internal organs. How a woman of Eliza's stature could muster such strength shocked Annie nearly as much as the odd pain she now felt in her chest. Eliza stood over her again, now with the entire patronage of the bar standing behind her and peering down. One of the last sounds Annie heard was the slamming of the open door to the outside, and one of the last sights she saw was the bearded and mustached man from the 10 bells over her. "Get back, all of you," the man shouted. "Detective Frederick Aberline, London Metro Police." Then the world went black. So, yeah.
I'm still laughing. I think you were channeling Terry Jones from Monty Python there, weren't you, with that voice?
Yeah, that's what I try to bring you. It's all for you, Brother Mendees.
That was brilliant.
Horror, supposedly.
You can't take whore. Brilliant. Seriously, I was taking a swig when you did that, and I nearly choked.
Yeah, I learned most of those words from my my Arsenal friends who are fellows of the football team and use those bad words all the time about soccer.
Oh well, of course, yeah. Well, the thing is, it's a term of endearment.
But yeah, that's Annie. Things don't get much brighter from there, but I won't spoil it, as you know.
Yeah, no, it's what I liked about it as well, that you read about it, and because that fight over the bar of soap, that was like one of the last times she was seen alive, and I was just like, oh, brilliant, yeah. So yeah, nice one, man.
My pleasure.
I'm gonna have to read. I'm gonna do my reading now, and I'm just like, stop laughing for 2 minutes.
Well, good
thanks,
luck,
man. I'll bring you back on in a bit.
Thanks.
Excellent. Yeah. So that brings you up to me. As you probably gathered, I had to herd cats on this one, and like I said, I couldn't have picked. I mean, there's such a diversity in the stories, which is something I wanted, which is why I chose the people I did. And you like Drew was just saying about his chapter, went into the real seedy aspect of it, and you got the more overtly Lovecraftian, like Jonathan's and Holley's, and then you had like some serious black humor in there with V.A. Vasquez. I sorry if I got pronounced your name wrong, but her chapter on Mary Kelly just, it's still got one of the best first lines I have ever heard. I think David Green peering into the thing now. I'll bring that up in a minute. Sit back. He's just nailed me in the comments, the fucker. But anyway, right, yeah. So I had the task of bringing it all to a conclusion. So my chapter is, but the whole premise of it was the 13 authors, and each one of us had a victim. Now mine is Jack the Ripper. So yes, here's my. I can't do too much because of spoilers, but this should give you an idea. Aberline pulled his cape around his chest and limped down Dorset Street. The omnipresent fog had steadily grown from a wispy London particular to a thick piece super in the week since he had hurriedly scrawled his message. He had yet to see a reply and had spent each night in a state of high anxiety, praying that his message had reached Stevenson and his shadowy cronies. The crumbling rabbit warrens of Whitechapel were dangerous and sinister enough when there was full visibility, and under the present conditions, they were downright terrifying. Every gloomy nook and cranny could quite possibly harbour cutthroats, muggers, and far worse. The things that Aberline had seen recently had driven him to the brink of the abyss. He had thought he'd seen it all, and then he saw what had remained of Mary Kelly. This had started his inexorable decline, as the horrors he had pledged to put a stop to continued unabated. For a brief moment, when his momentary favourite suspect, Montague John Druitt, was fished from the river with an oddly carved stone in his pocket, Aberline had breathed a tentative sigh of relief. Unfortunately, Things seemed to get even worse from that point onwards. Throughout the investigation, he had seen so many suspects turn out to be nothing more than red herrings that his confidence had taken a severe knocking. Wandering the streets night after night had taken its toll physically as well as mentally, and his leg was getting worse. This in turn had led to another factor in Abeline's frayed mental state. He had been hit in the laudanum pretty hard of late. The pain from his varicose vein was becoming unbearable. As his scuffled footsteps slapped off the wet cobbles, the voice of a young girl, amplified by the atmospheric conditions, gave Abeline one hell of a start. "Matches, sir?" "Eh?" Instinctively gripping the handle of his Webley revolver, Abeline spun and peered into the darkened doorway of a cat's meat vendor. The only movement that he could see was the gentle flutter of a lurid yellow street theatre poster, and the nearest gas lamp was too far away to provide any meaningful illumination. He was about to walk on when what looked like a bundle of rags shifted and a grubby little face appeared out of the darkness. "Lucifer, sir?" the young girl asked again, this time shaking the box. The rattle of the matches scratched Abeline's eardrums. I don't want... "Oh, please, sir. These are the finest matches around. You won't be disappointed." The match girl cut him off in mid-flow. Patting his jacket for the reassuring bulges of his pipe and cigar box, Abeline was shocked to discover that he'd absent-mindedly left his matches on the corner table of the Britannia. He'd always prided himself over his keen wits, but he'd been slipping recently. "Very well, how much?" "Eightpenny, sir." From the pocket of his waistcoat, Abeline fished out a handful of small change. With a crooked index finger, he rummaged through the coins, then sighed. "I don't have anything smaller than twopence here." He flicked the coin to the girl and stooped to grab the box. The girl's fingers were like ice, causing him to flinch from her touch. As he looked at her elfin face, he was hit by a definite feeling of recognition. The match girl beamed as she secreted a coin about a person and huddled back into the shadows. Abeline turned and started to continue on his vigil, but was stopped in his tracks by the match girl's words. "Thank you, Freddie." "What?" Turning sharply, Abeline's vision dived and his stomach twisted as he realized that the doorway was now completely empty. He had heard no movement, not even the rustle of the girl's garments, but she had gone. Pinching the bridge of his gin-blossom nose, Abeline swayed as the inhuman whispers and shrill piping sounds from his hellish encounter below came back to the forefront of his mind. The more he wrestled with the realization of what was happening in his fair city, the worse his mental state had become. With one hand on the grime-encrusted shop window for support, Abeline retrieved his hip flask from his pocket and gave it a shake. "Damn," he cursed as he realized that he had forgotten to refill it after his earlier episode. The visions have been getting worse of late. Every time his heart rate has increased, he caught flashes of the eye symbol and vague hints of the horrors that lurked below London's streets. The eye that wasn't an eye blinked and warped in his vision as he shook his head and tried to control his breathing. Blood roared in his ears, a deafening, rhythmic thump that seemed akin to the approaching footsteps of some monstrous bulk. Placing his back to the glass, Abeline started to frantically pat his garments, looking for anything that could calm his nerves. Eventually, the comforting chink of a glass bottle against his pocket watch caused him to exhale in relief. Extracting the cork from the top of the patent medicine bottle, Abeline took a deep sniff of the earthy liquid within. Fighting the urge to take a numbing gulp, he took a small sip and grimaced as the sharp taste of laudanum slowly trickled down his gullet. Shadows shifted underneath the canopy of fog, grabbing his attention as he waited for his medicine to kick in. Footfalls echoed around him as he clenched his fists and ground his teeth. A few seconds later, he realized that the footsteps were his own. He'd unconsciously stumbled down the street in the direction of the 10 Bells. That terrible place that seemed to be at the epicenter of all the evils occurring in London. "Get a hold of yourself, man," Abeline hissed as he eventually found himself able to breathe. Crossing the street to avoid any contact with those that called this den of sin home, Aberline took out his pipe. A good lungful always steadied his nerves. What in God's name? As he opened his freshly purchased box of matches, he was shocked to find that it didn't contain a single match. But it did contain a folded sheet of heavy paper. I'm going to leave it there. Because if I go any further, we're in the spoiler territory. Righto. So, yes, so you lovely people at home, if you want to start getting your questions in, I've noticed some stuff already in there. Yes, David. And I will bring everybody back. So, first off, Mr. Green, here he is. Probably you absolutely nailed me halfway through that. I'm like
It's what I do.
Holley, Trisha, Jonathan, and Drew. Excellent, guys. Yeah, some good readings there. That was absolutely superb. Right, I'm going to go through some of the comments now. But first off, I'm going to have to do it. The big old elephant in the room. It's not often you get messaged by somebody who's actually in the video with you. Hi, Tim. David says, I have a question. This seems a very meticulous operation, but I heard rumors that you supplied an unsuspecting author with bogus dates that caused him to have a minor existential crisis. Is this true? It was actually worse than that, mate. I gave you the wrong victim.
Yeah.
I gave you details about a completely unconnected corpse.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good fun. I was reading it and I was like, this something seems wrong. Well, I can't quite put my finger on it. So I was like, well, I might as well ask Tim about it. And Tim was like, oh, I think I've given you the wrong dates. I was like, that might be what it is, and the wrong victim as well. Yeah.
I gave you, I can't remember the name, but which is another torso murder book, which you did incorporate. But I was meant to give you the details of the Pinchin Street torso.
Yeah. I covered my bases because I started writing it, and I was like building into it that it was like a year after the last canonical murder, and I was like, oh no, I'm gonna have to like rewrite the entire. This is almost finished. And I was like, I'm going to have to just rewrite this whole thing. So I was like, I'm just going to mention both of them just in case.
Yeah. Well, that worked brilliantly.
Yeah. And then I was like, I think I've done something really wrong here.
Oh, God.
I remember when I was writing, it's the only part of this that I remember writing. I was sat at my desk and I was staring out of the window for about 20 minutes just thinking like, how am I going to fix this? Like, because the deadline is pretty soon. I was like, don't know. But hey, it wasn't my fault.
No, and I apologize profusely.
It's okay. It's okay. It happens with these kind of things.
Well, I just the thing is because because obviously, like I said, once the idea was in my head, I just literally wrote the brief like there and then, and I didn't check it, and I got the names confused. Basically, yeah. It's easy done.
It happens. It happens. Yeah. When I was doing my one, where I was doing the 0 hour one, like
0 hour, yeah.
I was just like dates and characters' names and all sorts of stuff just in my head and all the time, and then people would ask me questions, and I was just like,
Econ.
Yes. Yeah. So that one,
right, well, basically, you got me. I got you. You got me. So
that's right. So on that one, I there was a character called Eco in someone else's chapter, but I for some reason thought it was called Econ. And when I was doing
when I was writing mine, he told me that it was Econ, so I went back and rewrote it all and changed it, and then it was Chris Hewitt's chapter. And he goes, "What are you doing? It's Eco." It's like, ah!
Yeah, I did feedback on all the chapters as well and changed, put suggestions, change it all to Econ on like probably about half of the chapters, I think.
Mm.
Yeah.
Like you say, it's easy done. It's confusing when you got all this stuff.
Yeah, it's just confusing. Just life is confusing in general, isn't it?
You know what they say? Life is like a hurricane here in Duckburg.
Wow.
Yeah. Right. I'm going to start looking through the questions. We seem to have a few. So yeah, like you said, like to start everybody off. Obviously, even those that weren't au fait on the old Ripper murders, does anybody have a favorite actual suspect now? Like in terms of the people who know the actual case. And if anybody says the royal conspiracy, I'm gone.
I think we got pretty close to reality with our version. I think we're good. I think we're covered. I really do.
Yeah. So, David, your favorite?
I put it in my chapter. Like Abilene thinks, and I think he did actually in real life thought that Klawowski was the. I think he's probably the most likely. From what I've kind of looked into it, but I must say I do enjoy From Hell. I do really enjoy that film. I know it's not a great film, but I do enjoy it very, very
I enjoy it as a film. It's just the Ripperologist in me screams. It's just like
I just love a daft conspiracy theory, and I think I love just like it's a royal family cover up. I just think it's just a brilliant.
Oh yeah.
Shocky thing, but yeah.
Well, the thing is, there was a much better version with Michael Caine done in the late '80s, which I've still got. I've got on VHS. That was which was the Royal Conspiracy. William Gull, and who's another character. I wanted to include as many Ripper suspects as I possibly could, like through it, almost as Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I really like Ian Holm in that film. I think he's brilliant in it.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, as Gull. Yeah.
But yeah, so like Klawowski would be my one. It's kind of a boring one, I suppose. I think a lot of the evidence kind of points towards him in a lot of ways. But then there's so many like other things that are just kind of inexplicable as well that kind of muddy it all up. But,
well, I mean, my favorite is probably William Henry Berry, who was a sawdust salesman. So he had the cart, and he basically had a sort of place where he basically kept in his cart right in the center of Whitechapel, and he was later hung. He basically after it was Rose Myler, which I'm actually one of the people who believe that was going to be a Ripper murder, but was interrupted. Because I mean, the only explanation as why nobody ever heard the victim screaming was that he strangled them first. They were already dead when he started cutting them. So I think he was disturbed, and basically straight after that, he fucked off up to Dundee with his wife, and then like hacked up his wife like Mary Kelly. I don't know. I just from everything I know of actual like serial killers, it's never going to be a Stevenson type. It's they're always the kid next door, some unassuming nobody, you know.
Yeah.
It just rings. That just seems to ring more true with me. So Holly, have you got a favorite Ripper suspect?
Well, I for the same reasons as you, I like Stevenson because I like the whole occult conspiracy thing, and I've read up on him and on Aleister Crowley before this. I've always had that kind of interest in that. So I like him, but in terms of like realistic suspects, like people, you'll have to help me with the name because I can't remember, but there was a doctor who had like women's uteruses in like jars, and he was
Dr. Francis Tumblety. Yeah.
Yes, I liked him actually because he was like there was clearly something wrong with this guy, right? Like he had like female body parts.
He is one of the more plausible, yeah.
And and I think he had gone to America maybe while some murders in America happened that were very similar to the Ripper murders. So I think
he was an American, and one of the witness statements for it was Mary Nichols said she was talking to an American with a big mustache.
Right.
Tumblety was an American with a big mustache. So
I liked him. Like he was my favorite, like actual plausible suspect.
Americans
like,
with a big
could be this guy because he's.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've always thought he was one of the more plausible ones. Yeah,
even if he didn't do it, he probably did some real effed up stuff because he was.
Oh yeah,
he was a character.
Nobody ever did explain where he got all them uteri from, did they?
Right.
That's the thing with Whitechapel at the time, though, because it was just such a melting pot for all these just horrible people that were just floating around there, just doing despicable things. So
that was the East End. Then it was just the dumping ground, wasn't it? It was just all that whole area, Whitechapel, and like the Radcliffe Highway and all that. It's all just yeah. So Trisha, now you know Jack the Ripper. Have you a favorite suspect?
No, I mean my favorite is the one I'm hearing about when each of you speak. I'm like, oh wait, I think it's that one. So I wouldn't be good on a jury because it's like, oh yeah, they're guilty.
Nice, yeah. Walk into a courtroom, Trish is on it. You're screwed.
Yeah, you're going away.
It was you. Jonathan?
I like the narrative of the Stevenson, but I think one of the things that makes it hard for me to engage with true crime is that it becomes a story of like fighting narratives. So I don't like to speculate on that kind of stuff because I kind of like the vibe of not knowing more than I like the knowing somewhat. But I think Stevenson's the most interesting one because of that, like the weird occult nonsense to it, you know?
Yeah, that's what I've always thought. I can see why so many people believe the Royal Conspiracy and the Diary, because they're incredibly interesting stories, but they're always too interesting. Same with Stevenson. It's why I don't think they're plausible at all. Because because I mean, like everything we know about like serial killers is that they're quite mundane people at the end of the day. They're not going to be swanning about in a bloody cloak with a big top hat, saying I'm a magician like Stevenson, are they?
I wonder if the world would be better or worse if serial killers like advertised themselves that way. Like I feel like it'd be easier to catch them.
Yeah. Some guy in a big cloak and a top hat twirling a mustache.
Like they're doing their thing. Like
that's the thing. If you've ever seen pictures of Stevenson, he looks like a Victorian villain. He's got a big twirlable mustache. You can just see him tying somebody to the railway tracks.
I loved writing about him. I loved writing about him because I really wanted him to be in the chapter. And I researched him. I knew about him anyway, but I really went into depth researching him. And I was I loved writing him. And I always thought if we do a second one for this one, I'd love to do him as the main kind of person. As for if I do a chapter, that'd be I'd write a chapter from his point of view. He's a real character and terrible person.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was like there was him and Crowley and Yeats, William Butler Yeats. Yeah, these nut jobs in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. We're making candles out of human flesh.
Yeah. That's what he was saying.
It's not right with you, then, is there?
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of a precursor to people like Ed Gein over in the States, who was making bowls out of people's skulls.
Yeah.
So, Drew, do you have a?
Yeah, well, I will admit that I'm probably the least knowledgeable about Ripperpedia or whatever Ripperology. Sorry, but
Ripperpedia.
Maybe that's a project you could work on at some point when you're not rebels.
I could do that.
So, the pensioner is not. We know who that is, but I liked the idea of the pensioner, and I remember you and I toyed with maybe he's a little bit more involved. And the reason I liked him as a character is because he was apparently, this guy named Ted Stanley, who
Ted Stanley
was hanging around with Annie Chapman and the girls in the brothels, and that's where my head was the whole time. It was in the brothels. And this guy, He's one day he's a dock worker. The next day he's wearing a suit, and he's telling one lie to this person, and he's telling another lie to that person, and eventually it comes to pass. I guess he's just sort of a little bit of a sociopath without an agenda. But I don't know. I thought that was a cool idea, and I guess
because he's one of the actual like so a lot of these suspects were never suspects at the time, but he's one of the original like suspects. The pensioner, because he was this shadowy figure for ages, and then he was, he's just this old pervert.
Yeah, Michelle and Neen are really, thank you, ladies. Yeah, so the pensioner's my guy. I have a close bond with the pensioner in my heart.
You see Michelle Rivers' comment.
I'll be hearing about this for a while from her, I'm sure. Yeah.
Excellent. Right, I'll have a look if we got any. Yeah, no, actually, back to Drew. Yeah, Beth said he's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy, and that was your voice.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Was it meant to be an Irish accent as well? I thought I picked up an Irish twang in there too.
No, that's just me butchering it. You know, David, you can project whatever qualities from those women in the story that you want to on yourself. That's between you and yourself, okay? I was trying to go for sort of this Basic Fields accent, so
I don't have an Irish accent. I don't know where this comes from. I think Tim was taking exception at someone recently when somebody said I had an Irish accent, and he was like, "What are you on about?"
Yeah, no, it was Nikki. It was Nikki DeCusta. I don't know how you pronounce her name, but yeah, she was just like, yeah, because we were basically the running gags is that sort of me and David live together, and we are this odd couple.
That's not true.
It's true.
Well, she was just like, keeping David under your pillow to sing Irish lullabies. I'm like, he's got the same accent as me. He sounds like a Mancunian.
Yeah,
you don't sound like Irish at all.
Well, I talk to people back home, and they think I sound Irish as well. But then when I'm here, like my accent, like just stands out. Like I don't know what.
Yeah.
And people are like, "Where are you from?" It's like, well, I actually was born like not far from where I live, and they're like, "No, that's not true." It's like, okay, whatever.
That's the thing with the Manchester accent. You never get rid of it. You just can't bury it.
No.
Yeah.
Someone should write a short story in which Tim Mendees buys a new house, and he comes to discover there's a little sort of Irish demon leprechaun living under the pillow. His name is David Green, and at night he whispers weird things into his ear, and you can take it from there.
That's how we met. That's how we met.
Yeah.
This might be a bad pitch, but title-wise, The Wee Green Terror, is that anything?
Ooh.
Nice. Right, we have a question from from author Patrick Winters, who also does a cracking impression of Christopher Walken. So to the panel, what are some other eras, cultures, or figures throughout history would you like to see combined with the Cthulhu mythos? Now, that's a good question. So, take it around the group. David?
Like, my first thought always goes to Arthurian legend. But, like, I can't do that because you actually wrote a story that's coming out soon about that. So, that's a bit of a cheat to kind of say it. What would be a really good one? I guess like Roman era, like Roman legionnaires, like taking on like.
There is an anthology, Cthulhu Mythos, which I don't actually have yet, but I've read one of the stories in it, which is very good.
Right.
But yeah, it's something. Yeah,
I think that'd be really cool. Yeah, I think so because like you got all that. Yeah, I think that'd be. I mean, maybe even Greek. I mean, Greek is pretty might be an obvious one as well, like because of all the kind of creatures and everything that you have in that. But I'd love the image of like a bunch of legionnaires going in and doing the whole like turtle shields and everything against a big fucking Shoggoth or something like that. You know?
Shoggoth, that'd be great. A Shoggoth like barreling down the plains at him.
Yeah. That'd be cool. Someone write that, please, and I'll definitely read it.
Yeah, this is basically every answer you give now is going straight into my head.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
Holley. What do you reckon?
I think I have two, maybe. So the first, my head immediately popped to like the 70s, like Disco Cthulhu or something. I don't know. Because I think like a lot of people
Saturday
were
Night
on
Fever with tentacles.
Right? And I think a lot of people then were like, maybe this is a broad generalization, so please don't be offended. But I think a lot of people did a lot of drugs in the 70s.
Yeah.
So I think you've got that psychedelic thing going
I think
on.
that's safe to say.
Well, I mean, you have to explain disco somehow, right? But anyway, so that was my initial thought, was like Cthulhu Disco. I don't know. But as I thought about it a little more, I also think something set in like the period of the Crusades, because you've got like religious wars going on, and then I mean, if you have like these elder god figures, I think it just adds to like the cosmic horror of it all, that you're fighting these wars, you know, over gods that are like meaningless in, you know, in the scope of like these greater elder gods. So I think something like that could be really cool and really interesting too.
That's a really cool idea. That's a really cool idea. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Trisha?
I just think the 1950s, because it was such a clean kind of family, you know, and just to rip it apart and just be like, this is what was really happening.
I actually have. Where the hell is it? Are we back?
We're rudderless.
David, you're in charge.
Yeah.
What?
It's one of Chaosium's Call of Cthulhu things, Atomic Age Cthulhu.
That's cool.
It's really, really good. It's it's all set in the 50s. So
wow.
Yeah, it's all that nuclear family with, you know, and all that kind of grinning and happy and Baker-like. Yeah. Nice. Go. Yeah. Jonathan?
I'm tempted to say caveman times. I think it would be really interesting to have.
Now, to my knowledge, that hasn't been done.
That's why I kind of went for it, because I was like, people don't think of that as a historical age, but I have this image in my head of like warring tribes of Neanderthals that are like, you know, worshiping the different elder gods and all that kind of stuff, and like the idea of like
that's cool. Yeah, you could have like the tribe of Hastur, the tribe of Nyarlathotep.
Yes, and like to have like a figure like Nyarlathotep, like you could have him kind of being like a Prometheus for cavemen, like he's going around teaching them technology that they probably shouldn't have,
because he's basically like the, you know, because he's basically like the Loki of
right.
You know, he's the trickster of the bunch. So that would be really cool. I like that idea. A mammoth versus a Shoggoth.
Oh yes.
I feel like a caveman on a mammoth versus a Shoggoth. That'd be
a saber-toothed tiger, but with tentacles instead of sabers.
I feel like this one.
I think you broke Tim.
Saber tentacle
is amazing.
I feel like there's an anthology. I feel like there's an anthology being born right now.
There might be.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Lovecraft Cthulhu through the ages.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. That's brilliant. Yeah. Keep an eye on your inboxes, people.
We're in there. It's happening.
Yeah. So Drew.
So I think Jonathan made a veiled reference to this earlier, and Holley may be familiar with this story because it happens in her neck of the woods. Well, I won't say that, but anybody who's seen the American TV show True Detective, the first season in particular. Yeah, it's a police procedure.
But they actually use the King in Yellow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I thought that was fascinating because it essentially combined U.S. politics all the way up to a sitting senator, in which, and that's obviously a world which is completely devoid of any fantasy, creativity, or mythology. And then combining it with something so bizarre as, oh my God, this fucking Yellow King.
Yeah.
I mean, so I think, and I read a lot of political thriller, that kind of thing. And just that juxtaposition is so wild that I think it would break my brain and would be fun to see.
Nice.
Sort of in politics.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining
That's
lobbyists, like lobbyists that are working for different gods trying to get bills passed.
Yeah. Oh, well, most of them are spineless, creatures of the night and the sea, and various squids and crustaceans and other unsightly things.
Can any of us prove that billionaires are not already elder gods? I don't think so. Yeah. I think.
I'm just imagining over here, because I don't know if you have the same thing, but we have late night. We have on the TV party political broadcasts by all these weird ass parties that all these independents, and they've obviously been shot on a handheld camera. And it's all these these weird ass political agendas, and I could just see it happening. I actually I've got a VHS tape from a bunch of years ago. I've ended up videoing a load of these at the end of something that I'd already taped. Just because it's like, I've got to show my mates this. This is bonkers. So these weird ass parties that believe that in levitation and was it a natural law party and all this bonkers stuff. So I could see that happening late night. Vote Cthulhu,
He's quite persuasive.
Squid face. Yeah.
He'll only be on the late night TV channels for a certain amount of time. He'll be straight onto Sky News and ABC, Fox News, maybe.
Fox, maybe. Yeah.
We can get. I don't know if you guys know the My Pillow guy, who's great. He can sort of start talking about kids and stuff like that. You don't know this dude. You know what I'm talking about. He's a wild man. Even Trump is like, this. Anyway,
the other thing, Tim, which isn't so much of an era, but it's something that we've talked about quite a lot, is Carry On Cthulhu.
Oh yeah, well I'm doing it. Me and Callum are already. All we need is a publisher who's willing to take it on.
Yeah, Carry On Cthulhu. That would be amazing. I mean, I think I would.
That's going to be my answer. I would just I've talked about this. Now, me and Callum were talking about it, and I come up with the idea, because the Carry On Films meets Cthulhu, but I nearly destroyed Callum with one word: Nookie-nomicon. The Nookie-nomicon. Professor Fiddler, played by Sid James, going to find the Nookie-nomicon.
Oh, man.
As he says, what a guy.
Yeah.
I love him. Oh man, I think I would read that and I would just happily die as soon as I finished it. I'd be like, what is more to life than Carry On Cthulhu? That is
exactly. Seriously, it's going to happen. It's all I've got to do. All I've got to do is convince a publisher to let me do it.
Is Carry On like widely known in the States? Do you know about Carry On?
No. I'm only vaguely familiar with it, but that's because I'm like a film guy.
Right. Just look it up.
I did actually think about this because I thought there may be a problem with the rights on the name Cthulhu Carry On. So I thought of calling it Bawdy Abominations, a celebration of British humour and the Cthulhu mythos. So that way you could also bring in like your classic Whitehall farces and sitcoms and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, you can imagine, can't you, Del Boy and Rodney with
Rodney trying to sell
a shoggoth in the back of the three-wheel van.
Yeah. Filling up in the Robin Reliant, in the bloody Robin Reliant, trying to sell them some knock. They're like, he's got loads of tentacles, mate. We can sell him out watches for each tentacle. I really liked Up Pompeii as well. But I was big
Frankie Howard, man. Yeah.
You guys need to check out this whole. It's like this 1960s British innuendo-based comedy. That's basically what it is. And it's just all like nurses. It's like nurses and doctors and like people going on camping trips, and it's just like. It's amazing. It's just
it's basically it's mine and David's entire culture.
Yeah, it explains the way we are.
It really does. Yeah, it's the only thing that explains why we are how we are.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, we got a lot of good comments about the readings. Neen is here. Thanks for joining us. Oh, Jennifer Gordon, who says hello, Trisha, by the way, in case you missed the thing. She also said that Zodiac is her favourite of the Unsolved. Yeah, I've read a lot on the Zodiac. And the other big American one I read a lot about was the Black Dahlia. I read a lot of books on that. And the Cleveland Torso murders as well. You know, the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run or whatever they called him. Yeah. The Americans have some great names for serial killers. They really did. Like the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. Who would come up with that? That's great.
As soon as the newspapers get a hold of it, they're like fully just headline oriented.
Yeah. Well, that's sort of like Jack the Ripper, isn't it? You know, I mean, that's why, like David was saying, like the birth of tabloid journalism was the star in London at that point with the the big screaming Jack the Ripper headlines and all that.
I wonder if people called serial killers like silly little sausage man, that there'd be as many serial killers because they'd be like, I'm getting a really bad name here. I don't get a cool.
I would love to run a newspaper where the only thing is just making fun of people who are serial killers. Just to see if they would keep doing it, or if they'd be like, you know, you guys take the fun out of this. I don't want to kill people anymore.
I thought I was going to get a cool name, and you calling me.
The Canterbury Cockwomble. Yeah.
Can you imagine a serial killer in Canterbury? Most random place.
I don't know why. I like Canterbury. The
wee
green mates in Canterbury. Right, hang on. Okay, so what are authors' favourite non-fictional serial killers other than Jack? Simone asks. David? Favourite's probably the wrong word.
which serial killer was I really rooting for? I was like, I just want him to just get one more. Just go. You mentioned a couple that I kind of was interested in, like the Zodiac and Black Dahlia. I think the American ones, like for us, like British people, have this real kind of allure to, because they're all wrapped up in like Hollywood and like all this kind of glitz kind of thing as well.
Yeah.
There's always kind of like our serial killers were like Peter Sutcliffe and people like that, which is like, you know, it's just very, very normal range people. Yeah. So I don't know. I kind of like more than serial killers. I kind of like unexplained kind of mysteries where there's been something. Like I'm my favorite one, and I actually based a novel on it, which is coming out next year, I think, called the
Santa Monica Man.
Yeah, when it was based on the Somerton Man, which is this Australian thing. where they just found this guy on a beach, and all of his tags were cut out of his coat and all this kind of. There was just like no trace of who this person was, and then they found a car that had like a briefcase that had like the Tibetan Book of the Dead in it, and there's a bit of it cut out, and that bit was inside of his coat, and it was basically just like had this code on it which no one has been able to crack, almost like 80 years later or 70 years later. And the guy, when they did the kind of like tests on him, he was like some European. They reckon he was European. They had no trace of him, no idea where he came from. They had a few eyewitnesses saying that he was in like a train station the day before, and he was in like a hotel the day before that. But there's just no trace of him whatsoever. So that one was always something that kind of fascinated me, and I was kind of like,
why don't I know about this? I need to read about that. That sounds great.
You don't know it as the Taman Shud case, because that was the piece of paper that he had on it. It said Taman Shud, which is from the Dead. And
that does ring a bell.
Yeah, so that was so I kind of like based the Santa Monica Man on that, just to basically like let me like just in my own head explain like how this body might have appeared, like, and so that's the kind of thing that I really kind of like cover up kind of stuff. But it was obviously the guy was some kind of spook or something. It was just after World War II, and it was like
There's so many specific details with that one too, of like all the tags cut off the clothes. The like, there's like a thing about the specific printing of the book too. Like there's so many little spycraft specific bits of it. That it feels like it has to be a spy thing.
Yeah, that's what it felt like to me, and that's like so like with the book that I based it on, like it goes off in its own direction. I don't use like completely the same details or anything, but it was something that I was always kind of fascinated about, and that kind of stuff like DB Cooper and all that kind of stuff. They're not serial killers, but it's kind of stuff where it's like, how has this happened, and how did it happen, and no one knew anything about it, and anything like that. So yeah, like that's the kind of things that I would be more into, and that's why I like the Ripper stuff so much. Not so much like the serial killer aspect of it. It's just like, how did someone get away with this with so many people out looking for them in such a small place with so many people living in it? So that is my answer.
Holley, moving on.
I think for me, more again, sort of similar to David, more than just like the serial killer aspect of it. One thing that I've always been fascinated by are like these like cult of personality kind of leaders who can talk their followers into doing these things. So to that end, even though it doesn't necessarily count as a serial killer, I've always been fascinated by Charles Manson. You know, and because well, I think it's like, it's one thing to do these horrific things yourself. It's another thing entirely to be able to convince other people to do horrible things. Like the amount of manipulation and susceptibility that goes into that kind of thing. Like it's interesting to me. And I've like read up on like cults and how cult leaders like, you know, pick victims and how they draw people in and how they look for vulnerable people, you know, and I've always found that to be really fascinating. So for me, I think it's those figures. But if you're just talking like a serial killer who actually murdered people, I have to agree with Jacqueline in the comments. H.H. Holmes was a very interesting guy. Yeah, he had like this, I think it was like a hotel or something that he had outfitted.
Yeah, in Chicago, he built it in Chicago for the World's Fair.
Right, right.
And it was basically the entire corner building above a chemist's.
Yes.
And he kept getting different architects in, building secret rooms, and like there was gas chambers, there was a furnace.
Yes. It was wacky. And then when he died too, like I think if I'm not mistaken, he had requested that his body be encased in cement. When he was killed, because he didn't want anybody to like tamper with his body or something.
Yeah, because he was taking the skeletons and selling them. He was flogging the skeletons to medical, like to universities and things like that.
Yeah, so I think he's creepy and prolific enough that like I think stories more than what exists probably should be written about him. I think they probably do like an anthology with him. I don't know, but it's always been fascinating to me that sort of level.
There's always been a case that I've found fascinating. Funnily enough, bringing it back full circle, he's another very, very sort of. It's not, you know, it's a ludicrous theory, but there is people who believe that he was Jack the Ripper. So that's one of the more recent crackpot theories. It's like, oh, H.H. Holmes wasn't in Chicago for a while. Maybe he went to Whitechapel. But I mean, the MOs were just completely different. So to me, it just completely rules him out because he didn't get his hands dirty. He was all gas chambers and poison and sneaky ways of killing. He wasn't like what they call a lust killer, you know.
Sneaky ways.
Yeah, but I mean, he was killing for power and profit as opposed for sexual release, which is more like Jack's type. I mean, they're just completely different MOs, but it's an interesting theory. Trisha?
I'm along the same lines. I love the unsolved mysteries. I love kind of digging into that. I love when it's someone seemingly normal that snaps. And along those lines, Ted Bundy stands out just because he worked alongside Anne Rule, who was a crime writer.
Yeah.
And when he was arrested, she's like, no, he couldn't have done it.
Well, the best thing was they worked in a crisis center for rape victims.
Right.
And they worked on the late night shift, so people were calling in about, like, dealing with rape and serious assaults and this. And you had Ted Bundy saying, like, talking them through it and all this.
Oh, it'll be okay. It'll be So he comes across so normal, and that I think that is so chilling. I mean, it's scary when you have someone that's obviously unhinged. To kind of stay away from.
He was so clean cut. I mean, he was a lawyer. I mean, I've actually watched his trial because that's something you do in America that we don't. Like you video your trials. I've watched the trial when he defended himself. If he wasn't a serial killer, he could have been like a top lawyer to the point where the judge actually said at the end of it, saying, "It's a shame you took a wrong path, friend. I'd have loved to have worked with you." It's fucking bonkers, isn't it? It's just,
right. You have to wonder what that switch is. Like, what is that? So
and it wasn't just that. Like, he was one of the most vicious, prolific, and brutal serial killers in history.
Right, and to be able to pull off that
handsome,
normal.
That's
extreme. That's two extremes, and to me, that's like the scariest thing.
Yeah, I think why people still talk about Bundy to this day is that dichotomy. It's just like
I don't think there's a switch though. It's just like a mask that he's wearing.
A mask of sanity.
The person like does the thing is who he is like, and the only thing that he puts on is like an outfit or a costume that he just wears. And he
in that case. You're right. That's a mask, and that is one hell of a mask. But with certain people, there's that switch.
Yeah.
Where they go their whole lives, and then just something turns, and that's scary.
Well, the theory is that because he was one of those serial killers that had a type. They always had straight, long, brunette or blonde hair, and they all looked like his ex. Who? That was the bit. Like, and they also started around that time. He was killing his ex over and over and over again. That's the theory. Because they all, if you look at the photographs of his victims, they all look the same. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But it's the fact that, like, Anne Rule, like I'm saying, I'm a big fan of true crime books, and she's one of my favorite writers. I love Anne Rule's stuff. I've met Anne Rule. She's a lovely woman. She came over here when she wrote Green River Running Red about the Green River Killer. When she did a signing and I met her. So I've got a signed copy of Green River Running Red. It's a pride of place in my shelf, man. Yeah. It's just the fact that she's sitting there and she's a crime journalist and all the rest of it.
It's what she does.
Next to a serial killer, and he's her best friend.
Yes. He walked her to her car at night.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm a fan of hers. There was one or two of her books that I was like, she just seemed to be very, she didn't really have that kind of removed writing that she could have. There were a few times where it was obviously she was kind of from the beginning blaming. I mean, of course you're going to blame the killer, but for reasons that shouldn't have been it. So that kind of turned me off for a while, but her other books were very, you know, informational and, you know.
Yeah, I think the ones went more when she's actually being a journalist rather than a novel, rather than
there were a couple she seemed emotionally involved in, to where it was from the very first page just
there needs to be that sort of detachment to make it the objectives, isn't there? Yeah Right, so Jonathan.
For me, Zodiac is probably, I think there's such a thing in American culture of
well, he's your version of Jack the Ripper, let's face it.
And he has
with
this,
the letters and the ciphers and all that.
Yeah, there's this weird focus on gimmicks and like branding in American culture, and I think he really kind of embodies that to a certain degree. Yeah, like he just became this like there's like a super villainy vibe that America really.
He wore a hood with a bloody. With a crosshairs on it.
it's truly a kind of haunting super villain vibe that he brings to it, and I think it's. I just find that idea that somebody who is going to do something like the things that he did, looking in a mirror and being like, but I got to look cool when I do it, is so haunting to me. The idea that he's like, well, I can't look like a weirdo when I'm killing these people. Like,
but there was a whole
disturbingly human.
You've hit the nail on the head with that in Zodiac. I think in his head he was a comic book villain.
Yeah, I think he thought that he was like a superhero.
He was like he had codes and all that.
The person that like people involved in the case, like I convinced who it was, also had a lair as well. He had like a little basement hideaway with all of his stuff. He was like a supervillain. Like, and it's just it's such a like I think in a lot of other countries, the guy, I can't remember the name of the guy. If I'm sure someone knows. Like, but like the people who were involved in the case who were convinced who it was, in a lot of other countries, that person would have been convicted as well. But because of like the way
Arthur Lee Allen, it was Arthur Lee Allen who was the main suspect.
But like because of the way like especially then as well, the way the kind of legal system works there was enough reasonable doubt and like how.
One of the big problems was they blew the double jeopardy thing.
Yeah. Whereas if it was in the UK, like he would have been convicted because it was like there's enough evidence, circumstantial evidence and stuff to suggest it was him. Like,
that's always a fascinating thing to me with true crime too. Is once you get to the actual like, can you make any of the charges stick? I feel like there's such an interesting thing between countries of what you can actually charge people with, the burden of proof, all that kind of stuff.
Something I find fascinating is how different law can be. I mean, like I find like America, I find fascinating because it's not countries; it's state to state. Right. You have all these different laws and wrinkles, and I find it fascinating the way like different states will work to like even a neighboring state, and their sort of procedures will be different, and to these little quirks in the law and all that. And we've got one here. Scotland, right, has got one of the most bizarre laws. There's not just guilty and innocent in Scotland. There's not proven. So you can either be found guilty, innocent, or not proven. Not proven means we think you're guilty, we know you're guilty, but we can't prove it.
Yeah.
And they're
I think that makes a lot of sense, to be honest with you.
I'm torn between thinking it's a great idea and thinking it's a terrible idea, because I'm used to American cops where they'll try and make anything stick, even if they don't have, or even if they have to falsify evidence to make it stick. Or I'm like, it would be good in some cases, but it feels like a lot of the time if the American system had a not proven, every case would be a not proven where they didn't have direct evidence to prove, even if the people didn't have anything to do with the crime.
Isn't that kind of like the difference with the O.J. Simpson case, though, where he was by law and they were like,
that was just a mess.
But then when he took it to the person, what's the name of the other one they brought it to, and they sued him basically, and it was proven that like they were like, well, there's reasonable doubt that we think that you did do it, but like it's
there's such an interesting interplay between the civil court versus the criminal court in America, where you can prove damages without having to prove criminal liability, which is so interesting too.
Yeah,
it's really odd.
Yeah. Crazy stuff.
It is interesting.
This has probably gotten far too specific.
No, this is great, man. I mean, this is why I do. This is what I love about these things. Is they take on a life of their own, and this is all really interesting shit to me. I love this stuff.
Yeah, the film Zodiac is amazing as well.
Right.
I think it's like,
isn't it? I mean,
yeah. I think the thing is though, it's one of those films that's like it's a modern classic. People will be watching this in like 20, 30 years time and be like, "This is just an amazing film. Like everything about it is perfect."
Like it's got one of the most, for me. I mean, something. I'm a big fan of Fincher. But I'm a big fan of like Seven is one of my favorite films. But I just that opening with I can't remember the name of it's one of the double murders in the Lovers Lane, and it opens with Donovan's Hurdy-Gurdy Man, which is a sinister fucking tune, which I love. I used to cover that song. It's a creepy fucking tune.
The thing that's so good about Zodiac, though, is that it's like it
was 100%. That was written by. That was actually I've got the book, the Robert Graysmith. He was the journalist who cracked the codes. He was working on it. I mean, that's one of the most factual dramatizations I think there's ever been of a serial killer case.
But like, it
was actually done with people who were involved.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's similar to Seven in a way where it doesn't kind of glorify the killings or anything. Like Zodiac is all about obsession, and it's about how like the different characters are obsessed in a different kind of way.
That's Fincher all over, isn't it? I mean,
obsession destroys their lives, like about this thing. It's an amazing. Oh man, I think it's like it's a perfect film in every way. Like it's brilliant, and then the subject matter is just great as well.
Yeah. I like the fact that they don't pull any punches on it either, and they will include all the like the real sort of the fuck ups in it.
Right.
Because you find a lot in these things that they'll gloss over the fact that the police basically fucked up royally, but it doesn't pull any punches. I mean, it's something I see a lot in these films, especially if you know the case and you're going, yeah, no, that didn't happen. Like that copper was not that good.
Man, a Zodiac anthology would be good, wouldn't it?
It would.
Ooh, that'd be interesting.
I was actually thinking that the other day when I was thinking about maybe doing something else along the same lines of another serial killer thing meets Lovecraft.
Zodiac.
I reckon Zodiac. I mean, that's just asking for it, isn't it, really, if you think about it? Yeah. I was also thinking about the another string of unsolved prostitute murders. This time they were in Hammersmith in London in the 60s. They were known as the Thames Nude Murders. The killer was also known, get this, is no word of a lie, as Jack the Stripper. Because all the victims were found naked, and most of them were actually choked to death on the guy's knob. It's really... Yeah, it's another one of them cases that nobody remembers, but yeah, it was the 60s.
How do people not remember that?
I don't know. But that was another one that the police basically know who did it, but he killed himself before they could bring him to justice. But because of our laws, they can't name him.
Oh, right, okay.
Because he wasn't proven or anything like that. It was not proven. But basically, the files are closed. They know who did it, but it's technically an unsolved case.
It kind of incentivizes people to murder a bunch of people and then kill themselves. Like, feels like that's a great way to not get it to stick.
Yeah, it's a bit of a price to pay for getting away with
Life
it.
pro tip for you serial killers out there.
You can imagine like the family of the people found out, or the person found out. They're like, listen, we don't want a bad name, so can you please just kill yourself?
They just hold an intervention. They're like, we tied the rope already. We got the noose. It's good.
Yeah.
Go in the other room.
We put any kind of dangerous weapons away. You can't hurt us. There's too many of us here. We've thought about it, and we really think the best course of action is for you to kill yourself. And if you don't, we're going to do it and make it look like you did. So, you know.
They're like, we brought this block of ice to hang you on.
Now there's one. Yeah, there's another one. A very interesting case. Oh, Berkowitz. Yeah. Well, Buffalo. He must be your
that Son of Sam is
hometown guy.
I think about Son of Sam a lot, but only in one specific way, which is where I go. Anytime there's somebody where it's a clear like the dog was telling me to kill, or like there's one there's a case like I think it's called The Stairway, where there's a husband probably killed the wife, but he says that an owl hit her on the stairs and she fell to her death. Where I just go like, most likely that guy is just a murderer. But like, what if the 1% chance that Son of Sam's dog was a talking dog and was like, you should kill those people, and that dog got off scot-free? I'm like, I don't think it was. But what if it was? It might have been.
It was the next door neighbor's dog.
Right, that's right.
Hang on. What do you mean 1% chance there's a talking dog?
I'm vastly overstating the chances of a talking dog.
No, understating. Like my son says there are talking dogs everywhere. All right, every dog that he meets.
Maybe you just can't hear them when you grow up.
You can't hear them. You just don't believe it. You don't believe that they talk. That's your problem. I've always said that's your problem. All right.
The one dog who was trying to reach out to the human world. He got misunderstood.
Yeah. And they got the yeah.
Son of Sam ruined it for all of us.
He got muddled up with the term love and kill. He was like, I want you to love this person, and it's just that wrong. It's understandable. It's a dog. You know, they don't really speak English all that well. All I'm saying.
I think that's really the problem. Is dogs are undereducated.
That's true. That is true.
Oh,
with some comprehensive dog education classes, we could be in a place where all of us are talking to dogs all the time.
Yeah. Do we leave dog training too late in their lives? Because by the time they're 1, they're 7. So maybe like 2 months is too late to start teaching them these things. Is all I'm saying.
And then you can put dogs on witness stands and be like, "Did you tell him to kill?"
Raise your paw if you told them to do it.
Objection, Your Honor. Prosecution is bribing the witness with treats.
On that note, I'm going to bring this to an end.
No, it's just getting interesting.
Right. Well, thank you, everybody. Right. Okay. If you want to win a copy, I forgot about that, didn't I? About the bloody book giveaway. If you want to win a copy of the book, all you've got to do, that lovely shiny book right there, is basically comment with the phrase "Cthulhu did it." And if you want to tell us, because there will be a video of a prize draw, probably involving me and David talking crap for half an hour. If you want to make it interesting, tell us your favorite Ripper suspect. If you want to make it interesting, if not, just say Cthulhu did it. It'll be fine, and I'll enter you in the draw, and I will let you know probably on Wednesday.
You'll get bonus points if you say it was a dog.
Called Steve.
Yeah, what breed of dog? What breed of dog was Jack the Ripper?
That's the real question.
No.
Right, question nobody's asking.
That actually brings me to something. My favorite. There's only been one other time that I know of where the mythos has crossed over with Jack the Ripper, and that is in this book, which is A Night in the Lonesome October by Roger Zelazny, which is an absolute bloody masterpiece. Now, in 13 Victims, there is an Easter egg. See if people can grab it. If you know who the main character of that book is, it's a talking dog. Me and one of the other writers, Josh Taylor, we're huge fans of this, and we were discussing it, and it's like, right, we've got to get some Lonesome October Easter eggs in there. So if you can spot them, you won't win anything, but kudos. Right. So thank you all we've gone massively over time. It doesn't matter. It's all good. So yes, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for watching. That's how you get hold of the copy of the book. It's there at the bottom of the screen. That's getbook.app/13 victims. Tonight's guests have been David Green. That's how you get hold of him. That's davidgreenwriter.com. Next along is Holley Cornetto, which is hcornetto.wixsite.com/my site. Then moving down, we have Trisha McKee, which is trishamckee.com. Nice and easy. Moving on from there, we have Mr. Inbody, which is twitter.com/InbodyWriter. Nice. Twitter. I still haven't got the hang of that.
I
just
starting.
Can't figure out how to use like fucking hashtags. They just make my head hurt. It's like I tried to do it the other week and I got a nosebleed. I was just like, I don't know what's going on.
There are things man was not meant to know.
Yeah. And I think Twitter is something I'm not supposed to understand. Also, we seem to have lost him. I've got no idea what happened. I assume.
He had a work call. It's in the chat on the StreamYard site. He had a work call.
Crap. I haven't looked. Hang on.
You're giving away all our secrets, Jonathan. No one knows.
Oh no!
Right. Anyway,
the magic is gone. I'm so sorry.
Our final guest was Mr. Drew Starling, which is www.drewstarling.com. Again, thank you all for tuning in.
Goodbye, Drew.
Yeah. So thank you all for watching, and thank you all for joining me, people. Again, it was a pleasure working with you as it was with everybody else. Such fun. We'll have to do something else, I think. Try and get the old team back together and do something else. I reckon that'll be good fun. Excellent. Right. So wave at the crowd, people. Bid them all a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
It's like rainbow, isn't it? Bye.